Even though the work stoppage only lasted a couple of days, industry experts estimate that it will take weeks for the supply chains to catch up from what was $340 million of economic damage per day during the lockout. So I wanted to really quick hit this international story. It's big. 10,000 rail teamsters in Canada were locked out of their jobs for a few days as negotiations stalled with the Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City rail companies. This from PBS. The negotiations that began last year are hung up on issues around the way workers are scheduled and contract rules designed to prevent fatigue. The railroads had proposed shifting away from the current system that pays workers based on the number of miles they travel to a system based on the hours they work. The railroads said the switch would make it easier to provide predictable schedules, but the union resisted because it feared the proposed changes would erode hard-fought protections against fatigue and jeopardize safety. Similar quality of life concerns about demanding schedules and the lack of paid sick time drove U.S. railroads to the brink of a strike 2 years ago before Congress and President Joe Biden intervened and forced workers to accept a deal. Back out of the PBS article. However, the lockout was ended early by the Canadian federal government in much the same fashion as the U.S. government ended the potential U.S. rail strike. In Canada, Labour Minister Stephen McKinnon petitioned the Canada Industrial Relations Board to end the lockout and send the union and the companies to binding arbitration, which is exactly what the companies had been asking for months. But the Trudeau government had at least postured reluctance to do that. Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the left-wing New Democratic Party, which is a junior coalition partner in Canada's Liberal government, walked the picket line with the locked-out workers during the stoppage and said he would vote against back-to-work legislation, but hasn't said whether he'll call for a referendum on Trudeau's leadership. That from Freightwaves and Industry Magazine, which also said in their article about Canada's rail lockout that the Teamsters purposely made Yellow go bankrupt as leverage in the UPS negotiations, which was an absurd drive-by and totally completely a lie and really kind of gross. But, you know, what can you say? It's an industry magazine. Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate. Even though the work stoppage only lasted a couple of days, industry experts estimate that it will take weeks for the supply chains to catch up from what was $340 million of economic damage per day during the lockout. The Teamsters Canada Rail Conference are going back to work, but have said they will challenge the constitutionality of the order in court. In a statement to PBS, Paul Bosher, president of the Teamsters Canada Rail Conference, which represents more than 9,000 engineers, conductors, and dispatchers, said, quote, "This decision by the CIRB sets a dangerous precedent. It signals to corporate Canada that large companies need only stop their operations for a few hours, inflict short-term economic pain, and the federal government will step in to break a union." And that's exactly right, and appreciate that clarity from Paul of the Teamsters in Canada. And it's really gross to see this kind of stuff from, supposedly labor-friendly politicians. So we'll be keeping an eye on this as the negotiations proceed. Again, it's unclear how this arbitration will work, how what the arbitrator is going to decide. But yeah, this is a very similar thing that happened to the U.S. rail workers 2 years ago. In some of the articles around this, they note that in the United States, some of the rail companies have already reached tentative agreements with some of their unions, which does not bode well for the prospect of a unified rail labor bargaining coalition, since some of them have already agreed to new 5-year contracts before the current contract even expires, which is, really just frustrating. I don't understand it. I don't understand why they're not bargaining together. Hopefully everything works out, but yeah, it's concerning for rail workers in the United States and Canada that the government on both sides of the Canadian border are lining up with the rail companies and basically allowing them to kind of do whatever they want to the workers, but hopefully they're getting a good deal in those tentative agreements at the very least in the United States. We'll keep an eye on that. I have sent an email to Railroad Workers United about those tentative agreements, which were announced last week, I believe, asking what this means for the rest of the unions that have not finished their negotiations. There are some of the rail unions haven't even started negotiations yet because the contract doesn't expire until, I think, January. So there's a long way to go. And it's unclear what's going to happen.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.